Welcome back to Silent Revenge Lab, the best channel for revenge stories.
The loudest sound in a hospital isn't the sirens. It's the silence that happens right before a heart stops. I've lived in that silence for 5 years. But no amount of medical training or trauma rotations could have prepared me for the moment those double doors swung open and I saw the face of the person who destroyed my life. It wasn't just a patient. It was my sister Chloe, the girl who stole my family, my reputation, and 5 years of my life with one single calculated lie. She was gray, soaked in blood and fading fast. And standing right behind the gurney, looking at me like they'd seen a ghost, were the two people who told me they never wanted to see my face again, as long as they lived. My parents. My name is Juliette Vance. I'm 31 years old, and I am a chief trauma surgeon. But to the two people trembling in the hallway, I was a ghost. A disgrace. A dropout. 5 years ago, my sister told my parents I had blown my tuition money on a gambling addiction and dropped out of med school. It was a lie so intricate, so well documented with forged emails, that my parents didn't even give me a chance to explain. They didn't just cut me off financially, they erased me. They blocked my calls, they moved houses without telling me. They weren't there when I graduated top of my class. They weren't there when I married the man of my dreams. For half a decade, I was dead to them. But now the clock was ticking, and I was the only thing standing between their golden child and a body bag. Hold on before we get into the real stuff. I want to know. What are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments. To understand how we got to this blood-stained floor, we have to go back to the summer of 2021, the summer the perfect Vance family shattered. I was finishing my second year of residency, exhausted, overworked, but happy. I called home to share some good news about a research grant. My father picked up, but he didn't say hello.
He said, "How dare you call this house?" I was confused.
I thought he was joking. Dad? It's Juliette. We know who it is, he spat. Or should I say, we know who you've become. Chloe told us everything, Juliette. The casino debts, the failing grades. The fact that you haven't stepped foot in a classroom in 6 months while we've been slave driving ourselves to pay your rent. My heart dropped. Chloe, my younger, innocent sister. I tried to tell him I was literally standing in the hospital break room at that very moment. I offered to FaceTime him to show him my scrubs, my badge, my patience, but he wouldn't listen. Don't bother with the props, he said. Chloe showed us the bank statements. She showed us the emails from the dean. You're a liar and a thief. Do not call us again. Click. I didn't realize then that Chloe hadn't just told a lie. She had conducted a symphony of destruction. She had spent months intercepting my mail and photoshopping official documents to make it look like I was a degenerate gambler. Why? Because I had found out she was stealing from my parents' retirement fund to fuel her own lifestyle. And she knew if she didn't take me out first, I'd expose her. She made me the villain so she could stay the victim. For 5 years, I lived in the shadow of that betrayal. I built a life from nothing. I worked 3 jobs while finishing my surgical training. I cried myself to sleep on holidays. I watched from a distance on social media through a burner account as they celebrated Chloe's successes, her engagement, her life, all built on the ruins of mine. But then the pager went off. Code blue, level 1 trauma. When I stepped into that abyss, the air turned to ice. My mother's eyes met mine. She didn't see a surgeon. She saw the liar she had disowned. But then her eyes traveled down to the name embroidered on my white coat, Juliette Vance, MD Chief of Trauma Surgery. The tray of surgical instruments rattled as the nurses prepped the patient. My father took a step toward me, his face a mask of horror and confusion. He looked at the dying girl on the bed, then back at me, the daughter he thought was a failure. "Juliette," he whispered, his voice cracking, Is that really you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have time. Chloe's heart rate was plummeting. The monitor issued a long, steady beep that echoed off the sterile walls. "She's crashing." The head nurse screamed. I looked at the woman who had ruined my life, and then I looked at the parents who had abandoned me. I had every reason to walk out of that room. Every reason to let the perfect daughter face the consequences of a world without me. But as I grabbed the scalpel, a thought hit me that chilled me to the bone. If I saved her, the lie stayed alive. If I saved her, I was saving the person who ensured I had no family. But if she died, the truth might die with her. The monitor was screaming. A flat, continuous tone that felt like a drill pressing into my skull. Fib, we're losing her. The intern shouted, his hands hovering over Chloe's chest. The E was a blur of blue scrubs and silver instruments, but for a split second, everything narrowed down to the sweat on my palms. 5 years of rage, 5 years of missed birthdays, 5 years of being the disgrace of the family bubbled up in my throat. I looked at my sister's pale, unconscious face, the face of the girl who had systematically dismantled my reputation, and for one dark, horrifying heartbeat, I wondered what would happen if I just slowed down, if I wasn't fast enough. If my hand slipped, if I let the silence take her. Dr. Vance? The nurse barked, snapping me back. Orders, now! The Hippocratic Oath isn't just a set of words. It's a cage. It forces you to be a saint even when you're dealing with a devil. I shoved the resentment into a cold, dark corner of my mind and stepped up to the table. Charge to 200, I commanded, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. Clear. Thump. Chloe's body arched off the table. Her heart didn't jump back.
Again, 300. Clear. Thump. Still nothing.
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother collapse into a chair in the hallway, her face buried in her hands. My father was pressed against the glass of the trauma bay, his eyes wide, tracking my every move.
He was looking at me, really looking at me for the first time since the fall of 2019. He saw the way the nurses looked to me for direction.
He saw the authority in my stance.
He saw the med school dropout leading a team of elite medical professionals to save his favorite daughter's life. Come on, Chloe, I whispered through my mask.
Don't you dare die yet. We aren't finished. Finally, a blip. Then another. A ragged, uneven rhythm appeared on the screen. We have a pulse, I breathed out, the tension in the room dropping by a fraction. But she's hemorrhaging internally. We need to get her to OR3. Now move. As we pushed the gurney out of the trauma bay, the wheels screeching against the linoleum, my father tried to grab my arm. Juliette, please, is she? Don't touch me, I snapped, not even looking at him. My voice was ice. I am her surgeon, not your daughter. If you want her to live, stay out of my way. The look of pure, unadulterated shock on his face was the first hit of adrenaline I'd felt in years that didn't come from a caffeine pill. For 5 years, they had treated me like gum on the bottom of their shoes. Now, I was the only person on earth who could fix the mess Chloe had made of her own body. We burst into the operating room. The lights were blindingly bright, reflecting off the stainless steel. As I scrubbed it in, my mind started racing back to the evidence Chloe had used to bury me. The bank statements, the emails, how had she done it? How had my parents been so blind? I realized then that Chloe hadn't just lied. She had played on my parents' secret fear that I was too successful, too independent. They wanted to feel needed, and Chloe, with her problems and her constant crises, gave them that. I was the daughter who didn't need them, so I was the easiest one to cast out. Scalpel, I said, holding out my hand. The surgery was a nightmare. A ruptured spleen, a lacerated liver, and a massive amount of internal bleeding. As I worked, digging through the damage, I found something tucked into the pocket of her jeans, something the paramedics hadn't cleared. It was a small, crumpled envelope. I didn't have time to look at it then. I had to focus on the bleeder. Suction! I can't see the artery. The room was tense. One wrong move and Chloe would bleed out on my table. I was working with millimetric precision, sewing back together the girl who had ripped my heart out. And then, as I was clamping a major vessel, the monitor started chirping an alarm I hadn't heard yet. Her blood pressure is bottoming out, the anesthesiologist warned. She's reacting to something. Is there a pre-existing condition we don't know about? I froze. My parents hadn't spoken to me in 5 years. I didn't know if Chloe was on medication. I didn't know if she had developed allergies. I didn't know anything about the person on the table because she had deleted me from her life. Check her records, I yelled. There are no records, doctor. She's listed as Jane Doe. The parents haven't provided the history yet. I looked at Chloe's face. She was slipping away again. I had to make a choice. I could guess the medication and risk killing her instantly, or I could wait for my parents to provide the info, which could take minutes she didn't have. I looked at the crumpled envelope sticking out of her jeans. Against protocol, I reached out and snagged it. I expected to find a prescription. Instead, I saw my own name written on the front in Chloe's messy handwriting. And the envelope was already open. My hands shook inside my latex gloves. I shouldn't have looked, but my eyes caught the first line of the letter inside. It wasn't a medical note. It was a confession. And as I read the first 3 words, my heart stopped. Juliette, I'm sorry. The sorry felt like a physical blow to my chest. In the sterile, high-stakes vacuum of an operating room, where every second is measured in heartbeats, that single word from my sister felt like a cruel joke. I shoved the letter into my scrub pocket, the paper crinkling against my thigh. I couldn't process her guilt while her blood was on my hands, literally. Blood pressure is still tanking. 60/40, the anesthesiologist yelled. Juliette, we need to move. I snapped back. Start the massive transfusion protocol. Give her 2 units of ONAG now. I'm going in to manually compress the aorta. I plunged my hands into the cavity of her abdomen. It was warm, terrifyingly so. My fingers found the source of the leak, a jagged tear in the splenic artery. As I held her life between my fingertips, the irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, Chloe had used her tongue to sever my ties to my family. Now I was using my hands to keep her tied to this earth.
Clamp, I demanded. The rhythm of the OR took over.
The clinking of metal, the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator, the focused breathing of my team. For 45 minutes, I wasn't a sister. I wasn't a daughter. I was a machine of biological repair. I sutured, I cauterized, and I drained. I watched the monitor stabilize, the numbers climbing back into the realm of the living. Stable, I finally exhaled, stepping back from the table. My shoulders throbbed. My neck was stiff. I looked down at my gown, splattered with the DNA of the person who had made me an orphan while my parents were still alive. Finish the closure, I told my resident, my voice hollow. I need to speak to the family. I stepped out into the scrub room. The water felt scalding against my skin as I washed away the evidence of the surgery. My mind kept drifting to that letter. Juliette, I'm sorry. Was it a suicide note? Was the accident not an accident at all? Or was she just finally crushed by the weight of the mountain of lies she'd built? I dried my hands and walked toward the waiting room. The automatic doors hissed open, and the silence that followed was deafening. My parents were sitting in the corner, looking small and fragile in the harsh fluorescent light. When they saw me, they both stood up instantly. My mother's face was tear-streaked, her eyes searching mine for a sign. My father looked like he had aged 20 years in 2 hours. Is she... My mother whispered, her voice trembling. She's alive, I said. No warmth, no comfort, just the facts. She's in recovery. The next 24 hours are critical, but the surgery was successful. My mother let out a sob of relief and reached out to hug me. I took a sharp step back, my hands up. The rejection was instinctive. Don't, I said. Her face crumbled. Juliette, please, we saw the name on the door. We saw you in there. We didn't know. You didn't know what? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous low. That I was a surgeon? Or that I wasn't the gambling addict dropout you told the neighbors about? Because the last time we spoke, Dad, you told me I was dead to you. My father looked down at his shoes, his hands shaking in his pockets. Chloe. She showed us the papers. She had the transcripts, the debt notices. We thought we were helping her by cutting you off. We thought we were being tough to save you from yourself. You didn't help her, I said, leaning in. You helped her destroy me. And you did it because it was easier to believe a lie than to believe in your own daughter. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled letter. I hadn't read the rest of it, but I knew the weight of it. She had this in her pocket. It starts with an apology. Maybe you should read it while you wait for her to wake up. Because I have a shift to finish. I turned to walk away, but my father's voice stopped me. Juliette, wait. We tried to find you. Last year, when your mother got sick, we tried to call. I stopped dead in my tracks. I turned around, a bitter smile touching my lips. You tried to call? My number hasn't changed in 10 years. You blocked me. You didn't try to find me. You tried to find the version of me that fit your narrative. Well, look at me now. I'm the dropout who just saved your favorite child's life. I walked away, the sound of my clogs echoing in the hallway. But as I reached the elevator, my curiosity got the better of me. I pulled a second piece of paper out of my pocket, one I'd swiped from the nurse's station. It was Chloe's toxicology report from the e-admission. I scanned the results, expecting alcohol or maybe some pills, but what I saw made my blood run cold. Chloe wasn't just in an accident. She had been poisoned. And the substance in her system was something only a few people would have access to. Suddenly, the confession in her pocket felt a lot more like a warning. The toxicology report rattled in my hand. Digitalis, a medication used for heart conditions. But in high doses, it's a lethal, undetectable poison that mimics a natural heart attack or a sudden crash. Chloe was 24 years old with the heart of an athlete. There was no reason for this to be in her system. None, unless someone wanted her heart to stop. My mind raced. Was it a suicide attempt? Or was the girl who spent 5 years poisoning my reputation finally being poisoned herself? I looked back toward the waiting room. My parents were huddled together, staring at the letter I had dropped like it was a live grenade. They looked broken, but were they guilty? My father had always been obsessed with the family's image. My mother was obsessed with control. Had Chloe's lies finally become a liability they couldn't afford? I didn't go back to my office. Instead, I bypassed the main elevators and headed for the secure IQ wing where they were moving Chloe. I needed to see that letter. I needed to know what she was sorry for before my parents had a chance to destroy the evidence. I slipped into the recovery room just as the nurses were finishing the hookups to the monitors. Chloe was a ghost among the machines, pale, tubed, and silent. I waited for the staff to exit, then I stepped to her bedside. The rhythmic hiss-click of the ventilator was the only sound. "You always did like the spotlight, Chloe," I whispered, looking down at her. "But this is a bit extreme, even for you." I reached into the plastic bag containing her personal effects, the one the nurses hadn't handed over to my parents yet. My heart hammered against my ribs. I found the letter. It wasn't just one page, it was 3. I began to read, and the world around me started to tilt. "Juliette, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead, and honestly, I deserve it. I didn't just lie to Mom and Dad, I didn't just forge those papers. I've been using Dad's identity to clear my gambling debts for years. I thought I could fix it, but I got deeper and deeper. When you almost caught me in 2021, I had to bury you. I had to make them hate you so they'd never listen to a word you said." I felt a bile rise in my throat. 5 years of my life, erased because she was a common thief. But the next paragraph was the one that made me go cold. "But Juliette, I'm not the only one with secrets. Dad found out. Not about the money, he found out that you actually graduated. He's known for 2 years that you were a surgeon. He saw your name in a medical journal and realized I'd lied. But instead of calling you, he used it. He's been blackmailing me, Juliette. He told me if I didn't keep funneling money to his offshore accounts, he'd tell the world I was a fraud and have me arrested. He's been bleeding me dry, and tonight he invited me over for a peace talk and made me a drink. I think he's trying to finish what I started." The letter slipped from my fingers, fluttering onto the sterile floor. My father, the man who sat in the waiting room crying tears of joy, was the man who had potentially just tried to murder his own daughter to keep his reputation and his bank account intact. And now he knew that I was the surgeon. He knew that I had seen the toxicology. He knew that I was the only person left who could connect the dots. I heard the heavy thud of a boot behind me. I spun around. My father was standing in the doorway of the darkened ICU room. The grieving parent act was gone. His eyes were flat, hard, and calculating. He looked at the letter on the floor, then up at me. "You always were the smart one, Juliette," he said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "Too smart for your own good. I figured you'd find that. Chloe was always sloppy. Even her confessions are messy." He took a step into the room, closing the door behind him. The lock clicked. "Dad?" I said, my voice trembling despite my training. "What did you do?" "I did what I had to do to protect this family," he said, moving closer. "Chloe was a parasite. She was going to take us all down with her, and you? You were already gone. You were supposed to stay gone." He looked at the monitors, then at the 4-bag dripping life into my sister's veins. It's a shame, really. A tragic post-operative complication. The disgraced daughter returns, tries to save her sister, but fails. The irony would have been beautiful. He reached for the IV line. The silence of the ICU was shattered by the rhythmic, mechanical whoosh of the ventilator. My father's hand was inches away from the IV line, the same line I had painstakingly placed to keep my sister's heart beating. I felt a surge of adrenaline so sharp it made my vision blur. This wasn't just about a lie anymore. This was a crime scene, and I was the only witness. "Don't move," I said, my voice dropping into the authoritative tone I used when a junior resident panicked during a trauma. "Step away from the bed, Dad, right now." He paused, a cold smile flickering across his face. He didn't look like the man who had taught me how to ride a bike. He looked like a stranger wearing my father's skin. "Or what, Juliette? You'll call security? Tell them your grieving father was just checking on his daughter? Who do you think they'll believe? The dropout, who spent 5 years in hiding, or the pillar of the community?" "I'm not in hiding," I spat, taking a step toward him, putting myself between him and Chloe. "I'm the chief of trauma. My name is on the charts. My reputation is documented in every successful surgery I've performed. Yours is built on a foundation of stolen money and a daughter you tried to kill." He let out a short, dry laugh. "Documented? Juliette, I've spent 2 years scrubbing your name from every conversation your mother tried to start. I told her you were using a fake identity to practice medicine illegally. I told her you were a fraud. She believes me. She always has." My heart hammered. He had poisoned my mother's mind just as surely as he had poisoned Chloe's body. He had turned my success into a weapon against me. "The digitalis, Dad," I said, my voice steadying. "I ran the tox screen myself. It's in the system. The lab has the results. If Chloe dies now, there will be an autopsy. And when they find that level of toxicity, the police won't be looking at a medical error. They'll be looking at the last person who served her a drink." His hand hesitated. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in those cold eyes. He hadn't accounted for the speed of a modern trauma lab. He thought he had hours, not minutes. "You think you're so clever," he hissed, his fingers curling into a fist. "But you're forgetting one thing. I'm still your father. And I still have the power to ruin you. You already did that 5 years ago," I said, leaning in until we were inches apart. "You took my family. You took my peace. You have nothing left to take from me, but I have everything to take from you." I reached for the emergency call button on the wall, but before my finger could press it, the door to the AQ suite swung open. It was my mother. She was pale, her eyes darting between the two of us, then down to the letter still lying on the floor. She held a second copy of the toxicology report in her hand, the one I had left at the nurse's station. "Arthur?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is she talking about? What did you do to our daughter?" My father's face transformed instantly. The predator vanished, replaced by the concerned, grieving husband. "Rose, honey, she's hysterical. She's making up stories to distract from the fact that she almost lost Chloe on the table. She's trying to blame me for—" "I heard you," my mother said, her voice growing stronger, colder. She stepped into the room, bypassing him entirely to look at me. "I heard everything you said through the door, Arthur. I heard you admit to the blackmail. I heard you admit to the peace talk drink." She looked at me, and for the first time in 5 years I didn't see judgment. I saw a mother realizing she had been the architect of her own nightmare. "Juliette," she breathed, a single tear escaping. "I am so sorry." "Save it, Mom," I said, my hand finally hitting the emergency button. "We have work to do." Suddenly, the monitors attached to Chloe began to wail. Her heart rate was spiking 140, 150, 160. The stable rhythm I had fought for was disintegrating. "She's seizing," I shouted, shoving my father aside to get to the crash cart. In the chaos, my father saw his opening.
He didn't move to help. He moved toward the exit.
But as he reached for the handle, 2 hospital security guards, alerted by the emergency page, blocked his path. "Sir, we need you to step back," one of them said. "I'm her father. I need to get help," he shouted, trying to shove past. I didn't look at him. I was focused on Chloe. Her body was racking with tremors, the digitalis toxicity finally hitting her nervous system in a secondary wave. Push 5 milligrams of midazolam. Now, as I worked to stabilize her, I realized the letter wasn't just a confession. It was a roadmap. And if Chloe didn't wake up to testify, my father might actually walk away. But then, Chloe's hand cold and clammy clutched my wrist. Her eyes fluttered open, bloodshot and terrified. She looked at me, then our mother, and then at the man being held by security at the door. She opened her mouth, but only a wheeze came out. She tried again, her voice a ghost of a whisper that chilled the entire room. He didn't just give me a drink, Juliette, she gasped. Check the basement. The safe. My father's face went from pale to ghostly white. The word safe hit my father like a physical bullet. He stopped struggling against the security guards, his entire body going limp as if his bones had suddenly turned to lead. In that moment, the man I had spent my childhood idolizing disappeared, replaced by a cornered animal realizing the cage door had just slammed shut. The basement? My mother repeated, her voice barely a breath. Arthur, we don't have a safe in the basement. We haven't lived in that house for 3 years. The old house, Chloe wheezed, her grip tightening on my wrist. Her knuckles were white, her eyes bulging with the effort to stay conscious. He kept the keys. He never sold it. It's all in there, the money and the files. The files on you, Juliette. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. The old house. The place where we grew up? The place where my childhood memories were stored and apparently where my adult life had been systematically dismantled. My father had told the family he sold it to pay off my gambling debts. It was the ultimate lie. He had made me the reason we lost our family home, while he was secretly using it as a vault for his stolen life. Get her stabilized. I barked at the nurses who had rushed in. If she crashes again, we lose the only witness. Juliette, look at him, my mother whispered. I turned. My father wasn't looking at us anymore. He was staring at the floor, his lips moving in a silent, frantic prayer, or maybe he was just rehearsing his next lie. But the security guards weren't moving. They had seen enough. One of them had his hand on his radio, calling for the police. I need to go, I said, my heart hammering. Mom, stay here. Do not let anyone near her 4 lines. Not even the staff you don't recognize. If she wakes up again, tell her I'm going to the house. You can't go alone, my mother cried out, reaching for me. Juliette, he's dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of, I said, stripping off my blood-stained surgical gown to reveal my scrubs underneath. He's capable of erasing his own daughter. I'm going to go find the evidence that brings her back. I didn't wait for a response. I ran through the hospital corridors, past the patients, past the vending machines, past the life I had built in the shadows. I burst into the parking lot, the night air hitting me like a cold bucket of water. I got into my car and drove. The old house was 40 minutes away, tucked into a quiet, wealthy suburb that prided itself on its perfect residence. As I pulled onto the street, I saw it. It looked abandoned. The lawn was overgrown, the windows dark and hollow like the eyes of a skull. It was a monument to the lie that had destroyed me. I didn't have a key, but I knew this house. I knew the loose window in the back near the kitchen, the one Chloe and I used to sneak through when we were teenagers. My hands were shaking as I pried the latch open. The air inside was stale, smelling of dust and rotting wood. I made my way to the basement door. Every floorboard creaked, sounding like a gunshot in the dead silence. I clicked on my phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. I headed for the far corner, behind the old furnace. There, hidden behind a false plywood wall, was a heavy steel safe. It was modern, digital, and looked completely out of place in the crumbling basement. I stared at the keypad. 6 digits. I tried my birthday. Denied. I tried Chloe's birthday. Denied. I tried my parents' anniversary. Denied. My heart sank. I only had a few more tries before the system locked me out. I sat on the cold concrete floor, my mind racing. What would a man like my father use as a code? What was the one thing he valued more than anything else? Then it hit me. The date. The date he cut me off. The day he officially became the sole owner of the family narrative. I punched in the numbers. 091219. Click. The heavy door groaned open. My flashlight beam hit the contents and I gasped. It wasn't just money. There were stacks of cash, yes, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but there was something much more valuable. There was a folder with my name on it. Inside were my actual medical school transcripts, my graduation photos, my original residency placement papers. He had intercepted them all. He had been holding my entire identity hostage in a dark basement while I was working double shifts to buy groceries. But at the very bottom of the safe I found a small, black digital recorder. I pressed play. The voice that came out was my father's, but he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to a man with a heavy accent, discussing transferring the final installment from my mother's inheritance. And then I heard a second voice. A voice that made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't Chloe, it wasn't my mother, it was my husband. The recorder slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor. At that exact moment, the basement light flickered on. "You really shouldn't have come here, Juliette," a voice said from the stairs. I looked up. It wasn't my father. The air in the basement felt like it had been sucked out of the room. Standing on the bottom step, silhouetted against the dim yellow light from the kitchen above, was Mark, my husband. The man who had held me while I cried over my lost family. The man who had walked me down an empty aisle because I had no father to lead the way. He wasn't wearing his usual soft smile.
His face was a mask of cold, surgical indifference.
"Mark?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "What are you doing here? How did you even know?" "I've always known, Juliette," he said, stepping into the light. He was holding a heavy manila envelope, identical to the ones in the safe. "Your father didn't just stumble upon your medical journals. I sent them to him. I've been his consultant for 3 years. The world felt like it was spinning on its axis. My marriage, the one thing I thought was untainted by my family's toxicity, was just another layer of the lie. Mark hadn't married me because he loved me. He had married me because I was the perfect investment. A high-earning surgeon with no family ties to question where the money went. "You and my father," I began, the realization sickening me. "You've been funneling my mother's inheritance into offshore accounts together. You used me as the cover. It was genius, really," Mark said, his tone conversational, almost proud. "Your father needed a way to move the money without Rose getting suspicious. Who better to blame than the wayward daughter with a gambling problem? And who better to manage the stolen funds than the son-in-law he supposedly hated?" I looked down at the digital recorder on the floor. The voice on the tape, the man with the accent, was the broker they used to launder the cash. Mark hadn't been working late at the firm all those nights. He had been here, in this basement, with my father, counting the money they'd bled from my family. "Chloe found out, didn't she?" I asked, my hand slowly reaching for the heavy flashlight I'd dropped. "That's why she was poisoned. She wasn't just a liar. She was a witness," Mark sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. "Chloe was greedy. She wanted a bigger cut to keep her mouth shut." "Your father's an old man, Juliette," he panicked. He thought he could handle it with the digitalis, make it look like a tragic heart failure brought on by her stressful life. He didn't expect you to be the one on call. "And now?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Are you going to handle me too?" Mark took a step closer, his eyes scanning the open safe. "I don't want to, Juliette. I really don't. You're a brilliant surgeon. You're going to make a lot of money in your career. We could still have a very comfortable life. All you have to do is put that recorder back, close the safe, and go back to the hospital. Tell the police your father had a breakdown. Let him take the fall. He's old. He'll die in a minimum security wing before the trial even starts. And you?" "I'll be the grieving husband of the woman who survived a family tragedy," he said, reaching out a hand. "We keep the money, we keep the house. We keep everything." I looked at his hand, the hand that had worn a wedding ring I paid for. I looked at the files in the safe, the evidence of 5 years of stolen life. Then I looked him dead in the eye. "I'd rather be a dropout than spend another second as your wife." I didn't wait for him to react. I lunged, not for the stairs, but for the heavy steel door of the safe. I slammed it shut with a resounding clang and swung the heavy flashlight with every ounce of strength I had left. It didn't hit him. It hit the light bulb overhead, plunging the basement into pitch-black darkness. "Juliette!" Mark roared, his footsteps scrambling on the concrete. I knew this basement. I knew the layout of the old furnace and the low-hanging pipes because I used to hide here as a child when my parents fought. I stayed low, crawling toward the coal chute, a tiny narrow opening that led to the side yard. I could hear Mark's heavy breathing, the sound of him fumbling for his phone to use as a light. "You can't run, Juliette. I have the keys to your car. You're trapped." I didn't answer. I squeezed my body into the coal chute, the rough wood scraping my skin. I pushed, my lungs burning, until I felt the cold grass of the backyard beneath my fingers. I scrambled out, but as I stood up, I saw the headlights of a car pulling into the driveway. It wasn't the police. It was my father. He had escaped the hospital. The glare of the headlights blinded me. My father's black sedan screeched to a halt, blocking the only exit from the yard. He must have slipped out of the hospital during the shift change or used his pillar of the community charm to convince a rookie guard that he needed to collect his heart medication. But looking at him now, stepping out of the car with a face twisted in desperate rage, I realized he wasn't there for medicine. He was there to burn it all down. "Juliette!" he screamed, his voice cracking in the night air. "Where is he? Where's Mark?" At that moment, Mark burst through the back door of the house, coughing and covered in dust from the coal chute. He froze when he saw my father. The two conspirators stared at each other, two men who had built a kingdom on my misery, now realizing the walls were closing in. "She has the recorder, Arthur," Mark shouted, pointing at me. "She heard everything. She knows about the offshore accounts and the digitalis." My father turned his gaze toward me. The mask of the grieving parent didn't just slip, it shattered. "Give it to me, Juliette. Give it to me now and maybe I can fix this. I can tell the police it was all Mark's idea. I can say he coerced Chloe. I can save you." "Save me?" I let out a laugh that felt like broken glass. "You've spent 5 years trying to bury me. You stole my graduation, you stole my wedding, and you tried to steal my sister's life. You don't save people, Dad. You delete them when they become inconvenient." I backed away toward the edge of the property, my hand white-knuckled around my phone. I had already dialed 911 in my pocket. I just needed to keep them talking. "You're a surgeon because of us," my father roared, taking a step closer. "Our blood, our name, you think you're so righteous. You're a Vance, you're just as calculating as I am. You stayed in that OR to save Chloe not because you loved her, but because you wanted to prove you were better than us. It was your own form of revenge." "Maybe it was," I said, my voice cold and steady. "But here's the difference, my revenge saves lives. Yours ends them." Mark, seeing my father's distraction, started edging toward me from the side. I was trapped between the man I had married and the man who had raised me. Two predators closing in on the dropout. "The safe is open, Arthur," Mark hissed. "The transcripts, the bank logs, it's all exposed. If the police get here, we're both done. Grab her," Mark lunged. I dodged, but my foot caught on an overgrown root, and I went down hard. My phone skittered across the grass. Mark pinned my shoulders, his face inches from mine. I really did like being married to a doctor, Juliette. The prestige was nice. But I like my freedom more. He reached for my throat, but a sudden deafening siren cut through the air. Blue and red lights began to dance against the trees at the end of the driveway. "Please, stay where you are!" A megaphone boomed. My father panicked.
He didn't look at me or Mark. He looked at his car, his escape.
He dived back into the driver's seat and slammed it into reverse, tires screaming. But he didn't see the second squad car pulling in behind him. Crunch. The sound of twisting metal echoed through the neighborhood. My father's car was pinned. Mark let go of me, his eyes wide with terror, and tried to bolt for the woods behind the house. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing my phone.
"He's heading for the creek," I yelled to the officers swarming the yard.
"And the evidence is in the basement safe. Oh, 91219. Check the recorder." As the police tackled Mark into the mud and dragged my father from the wreckage of his car, I sat down on the grass. My scrubs were torn, my hands were shaking, and my heart felt like it had been through a meat grinder. But as the officers led my father past me in handcuffs, he stopped. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a loathing so deep it was almost impressive. "You think you won?" he spat. "You have no one left, Juliette. Chloe is a thief, your mother is a fool, and I am the only reason anyone ever respected you. You're alone. I looked at the man who had tried to erase me. I've been alone for 5 years, Dad, and in those 5 years I became a chief surgeon. Imagine what I can do now that I don't have you dragging me down. As the sirens faded into the distance, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the hospital. Patient Chloe Vance is awake. She's asking for her sister. But as I stood up to head back to the hospital, I noticed something in the wreckage of my father's car. A small leather-bound ledger had fallen out of the door pocket. I picked it up and flipped to the last page. The blood drained from my face. My father hadn't just been stealing from my mother. He had been paying someone whose name I recognized from the hospital board of directors. The conspiracy didn't end in the basement. It went all the way to the top of my hospital. The ledger felt heavy in my hands, like a slab of lead. I stared at the name scrawled on the final page. Dr. Sterling Vance. No, not Vance. Dr. Sterling Thorne. The chairman of the hospital board. The man who had personally signed off on my promotion to chief of trauma. The numbers next to his name were staggering. Monthly payments of $50,000 labeled simply as consultation fees. My father wasn't just hiding from the truth. He was buying it. He had been paying the head of my hospital to keep an eye on me, to ensure that if I ever got too successful or too close to the truth, there was a kill switch on my career. I looked back at the house, now swarming with forensic teams. Mark was being loaded into a separate van, his face hidden by his shirt. My father was already gone. I was standing in the wreckage of a life I thought I had reclaimed, only to realize the trap was much wider than I ever imagined. I drove back to the hospital in a trance. The sunrise was beginning to bleed over the horizon, a bruised purple and orange sky that felt mocking. I didn't go to the ICU first. I went to my office. I sat at my desk and pulled up the internal hospital logs. My hands were steady now, the surgical cold had taken over. I looked at the records for the night Chloe was brought in. I looked at the duty roster. And then I saw it. Dr. Thorne hadn't been scheduled that night. But his keycard had been used to access the pharmacy, the exact same cabinet, where the digitalis was stored just 30 minutes before Chloe's accident was reported. My father hadn't poisoned the drink. He had provided the opportunity, but Dr. Thorne? He was the one with the access. He was the one who knew exactly how much would look like a natural failure. A soft knock on my door made me jump. I closed the laptop screen just as the door opened. It was my mother. She looked fragile, her eyes red and swollen, but she was wearing a clean set of clothes the hospital chaplain must have provided. "Juliette," she said, her voice small. She's talking. She wants to see you. She's terrified." "I'm coming, Mom," I said, standing up. I tucked the ledger into my waistband, hidden by my scrub top. "But first, I need you to tell me the truth. How much did you know about Dr. Thorne?" My mother flinched at the name. She sat down in the guest chair, her hands trembling in her lap. "He was your father's roommate in college. They were best friends. When your father told me you had fallen off the path, Sterling was the one who confirmed it. He told us he had seen the disciplinary reports. He told us you were dangerous to the family's reputation. He lied to you for 5 years," I said, the anger rising again. "And Dad paid him for it. With your money." "I know," she whispered. "I saw the bank alerts on my phone tonight. I was so blind, Juliette. I wanted to believe you were the problem because if you weren't, then my whole life was a lie. I'm so sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't the villain. She was the collateral damage. Just like me. Just like Chloe. "Stay here," I said. "Lock the door. Don't let anyone in except the police." I walked down to the ICU. The hiss click of the ventilators felt different now. It sounded like a countdown. I entered Chloe's room. She was sitting up slightly, her face pale against the white pillows. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Juliette," she sobbed. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would go this far, I just wanted the money. I just wanted to be like you." "Like me?" I asked, pulling a chair to her bedside. "You destroyed me, Chloe. I was jealous." She cried. "You were always the perfect one, the doctor, the star. I was just the other sister." When I started losing the money at the tables, I panicked. I thought if I made you look bad, they'd look at me more. But then Dad, he took over. He made it so much worse. He told me if I ever told the truth, he'd have Dr. Thorne pull your license. He said he'd make sure you never worked again. So that was it. The ultimate leverage. My father wasn't just protecting himself. He was holding my dream over Chloe's head like a guillotine. "Where is Thorne now?" I asked. "He's in the building," Chloe whispered, her eyes darting to the door. "He came in 10 minutes ago." "He said he needed to check my vitals, Juliette." He looked at me. He looked at me like I was a mistake he needed to erase. Just then, the heart monitor began to beep rhythmically. Not a crash, but a warning. Someone was remotely accessing the ward's monitoring system. I looked at the medication pump connected to Chloe's 4. The numbers were changing. Someone was overriding the dosage. Someone was trying to finish the job from a computer terminal somewhere else in the hospital. "Juliette," Chloe gasped, her chest tightening. I feel dizzy." I grabbed the 4 line and ripped it out of her arm. "Breathe, Chloe, just breathe." I looked up at the security camera in the corner of the room. I knew he was watching. I leaned into the camera, my face filled with a cold, predatory fury. "I see you, Sterling," I whispered. "And I'm coming for you." I turned to the nurse's station, but the phones were dead. The entire wing was being electronically isolated. The silence in the AQ was more terrifying than the sirens. No monitors humming. No phones ringing, just the sound of my own breath and Chloe's ragged gasps. Dr. Thorne hadn't just compromised the system. He had turned the hospital into a digital cage. But he forgot one thing. I don't need a computer to be a surgeon. I know every inch of this building, and I know exactly where a coward hides when he's playing God. "Stay under the bed," I whispered to Chloe, shoving a manual oxygen mask into her hands. "Don't come out until you hear my voice and no one else's." I didn't take the elevator. I took the service stairs, racing up toward the executive wing. My heart was a drum, but my hands were steady. I burst into the chairman's office. The room was dark, illuminated only by a wall of monitors displaying every corner of the hospital. Sterling Thorne sat in his leather chair, his back to me, watching the feed of Chloe's empty hospital bed. "You're late, Juliette," he said without turning around. "I expected you 5 minutes ago." "You always were over-ambitious, but your pacing needs work." "It's over, Sterling," I said, tossing the ledger onto his desk. It landed with a heavy thud. "The police have my father, they have Mark, and they have the safe. Your name is all over the digitalis logs, and your consultation fees are documented right there." Thorne turned his chair around.
He didn't look scared, he looked bored. "A ledger? In the age of encryption?"
"Your father was always a sentimental fool. But that book isn't evidence, Juliette. It's a fairy tale." "I'm the chairman. I've saved this hospital millions. Who are they going to believe? A disgraced daughter with a history of instability or the man who built this institution? They'll believe the truth," I said, stepping closer. "Because I didn't just come here to talk." I pointed to the lapel of my scrubs. Tucked into the fabric was a tiny high-definition recording device, the kind we use to document complex surgeries for training. "I've been live-streaming this entire conversation to the hospital's internal server," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "The security team, the board members, the nurses, they're all watching you right now, Sterling. You just confessed to everything." His face drained of color. He lunged for the computer to kill the feed, but it was too late. The heavy oak doors of his office burst open. It wasn't just security, it was the police, led by the same officers who had arrested my father. As they tackled Thorne to the ground, the god of the hospital looked like nothing more than a pathetic middle-aged man in an expensive suit. He screamed about his legacy, about how he made me, but I didn't listen. I walked out of the office and didn't look back. 1 month later, the dust finally settled. My father and Mark are facing decades in prison for embezzlement, conspiracy, and attempted murder. My mother has started the long process of reclaiming her life, and for the first time in 5 years, we had Sunday dinner together. It was quiet, and there was a lot of crying, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. Chloe is in a long-term recovery program. She has a long way to go to earn my trust, but as her surgeon, I saved her life. As her sister, I'm giving her a chance to save her soul. I'm no longer just the chief of trauma. The board offered me Thorne's old position, but I turned it down. I belong in the OR, where the truth isn't found in ledgers or offshore accounts. but in the heartbeat of a patient who was given a second chance. Thanks for watching this journey with me. If this story resonated with you, make sure to hit that like button and share this video. It helps us more than you know. And if you want to see more stories of justice being served, subscribe to the Silent Revenge Lab and turn on those notifications. See you in the next one.